I'm Anastasia Chatzka, a fashion designer with over 20 years of experience and a sewing educator. And I'm really excited you're here to share another sewing adventure with me today. Welcome to Sewing Anastasia, and today we are going to talk about the zigzag stitch. What is it good for? When do we use it? How do we use it? How do we know which zigzag stitch to select? Because there are multiples. Well, I'm going to go over it with you and show you and tell you everything you need to know about the zigzag stitch. If you're not already a subscriber to Sewing Anastasia, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because videos come out every single week. So many sewing videos. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching all of my videos. So back to the zigzag stitch. One of the most common areas it's used is just finishing the edge of a piece of fabric. So if you don't have a serger, you can just zigzag your edges. The zigzag stitch is also used in a lot of knitwear for home sewing. So if you don't have a serger, you can sew your seams with a zigzag stitch because it allows it to stretch still. Because if you sewed a knit fabric with a straight stitch and you stretched it, it would pop and break, and then you'd be unraveling at the seams literally. And then we have the broken zigzag stitch. It's a zigzag stitch that has all those little straight stitches in between all the zigs and the zags. That one's used for a lot of lingerie and swimwear as well because it has extra stretching potential, which we all want in our swimsuits and lingerie. That broken zigzag stitch is excellent for applying elastic as well. You can also use a regular zigzag for applying elastic as well, but that broken zigzag just gives it that little extra stretch. You can also use a zigzag stitch to gather fabric. That is my favorite gathering technique ever. So if you haven't seen that video on how to gather fabric with a zigzag stitch, make sure you check it out. There's gonna be a card up here and a link down below. The zigzag stitch is also great for mending. I love using it when my jeans rip or fall apart, or that pocket's coming apart, or the inner thighs on a pair of pants are wearing thin. You put that zigzag stitch on and zigzag it all back together. The zigzag stitch has so much potential. So let's head over to the sewing machine and try out some of these zigzag stitches and talk about what foot you should also be using on your machine when you're using the zigzag stitch. So in its most basic form, a zigzag is literally zigging and zagging. We have all seen this or practiced this when we are carving a pumpkin or creating some mountains, right? So this is our zigzag stitch. And we can also do a condensed zigzag stitch, which ends up looking like a satin stitch. So sometimes machines have presets for these, and sometimes you just need to make your stitch length really short, and it's just a bunch of zigzags on top of each other.
Roll.
And then if we're creating a broken zigzag, it's all these little stitches in between the zigs and the zags. So an easy way to think about the zigzag stitch is it's kind of like a spring because it lets you pull your fabric and gives it some stretch and give. And it also bounces back once it's been stretched. So now I'm going to show you what these actually look like on the sewing machine. But before I show you the stitches, we need to make sure we have the proper foot on. If you have a Viking machine, it's going to be labeled the B foot. If you don't have a Viking machine, no worries, just look for the one that has a cutout on the bottom of the foot. So when we flip over the B foot, you're going to notice this cutout on the back of it, and that's going to allow for the density of the zigzag stitches to just glide under the foot and not get stuck. Okay, we're gonna start with a really wide stitch for the zigzag. You'll notice it's gonna go back and forth, right to left, creating that spring look. Now we can make it a little narrower. Make it a little narrower again. Now we can make it even narrower. It is so small now. Look at that. So that's your basic zigzag. So let's take a look at that. We've got our really wide stitches We're getting narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower. Look at that. So you have so much variety for the different zigzag stitch widths, which is great for all different projects. So now let's play with the stitch length and make them really dense. The dense zigzag stitches are also called applique stitches or a satin stitch, and these are great for making appliques. So let's try them out. So we're gonna start with a wide satin stitch, which is a condensed zigzag stitch. You'll notice it's still going back and forth, but it's not taking a super long stitch length. We can also make these narrower as well. So let's take a look at these stitches. So you can see we have the really wide, dense zigzag stitch and the really narrow, dense zigzag stitch. So next, I'm going to be creating the broken zigzag stitch. I'm going to start with a really wide one. So you can see it's making all these little stitches within the zigs and the zags. Now I'm going to make it a little narrower. So we'll do a medium one. Now we'll make it really narrow. And now let's also make this one a little denser. Let's take a look at those. So you can see we have the really wide broken zigzag, we have the medium, and then we're going into the narrow small, and then I made the stitches denser with this one right here. So you have a lot of different options between your widths and your lengths for all of these zigzag stitches. So let's take a look at this broken zigzag. You'll notice there's 1, 2, 3 stitches, and then it zigs 1, 2, 3, zag, 1, 2, 3, zig, and it just keeps repeating. So there's all these little extra stitches in between the zig and the zags. And that's going to give you even more flexibility within your projects for stretching. So let's go over what we have. We have our regular zigzag stitches, which are used for sewing, knitwear, and creating gathering stitches and all kinds of good stuff. And then we have our condensed zigzag. You'll see these a lot on buttonholes and eyelets and used for applique. And then we have our broken zigzag stitch, which is used a lot for applying elastic in swimwear and in lingerie. The zigzag stitch has so many uses and applications in home decor and fashion. So next time you see it on your machine, don't ignore it. Give it a whirl. Try it out on your next project. If you have any questions or comments about the zigzag stitch, leave it down below and I'll get back with you as soon as I can. Also, I would love to know what you thought about the video, so leave it down below in the comments. And make sure you tell me, where do you use zigzag stitches at? I'm sure you use them in a few creative ways that I haven't even thought of, so share them with everyone else down below. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and some applause. And if you're not already a subscriber to Sew Anastasia, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell because new videos come out every single week. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.